The day I opened that letter, my entire family stopped feeling like home. It wasn't a divorce paper. It wasn't a hospital bill. It wasn't even a lawyer's notice. It was a single handwritten letter, hidden for 12 years, that proved the biggest lie in my family's history. Everyone I loved had built their lives on that lie, except me. And by the time I discovered the truth, someone had already decided I was the one who needed to disappear. My name is Claire Foster, and for most of my life, I believed I had the perfect family. My parents weren't wealthy, but our home was always filled with laughter, birthday dinners, and Sunday mornings that felt untouched by the outside world. My older brother, Ryan, was the pride of the family. He could do no wrong. I never envied him. In fact, I admired him. While everyone celebrated his promotions and achievements, I quietly became the person who held everything together. When Dad's health declined, I was the one driving him to appointments. When Mom struggled after surgery, I moved back home for 6 months without asking for anything in return. I never counted the sacrifices because I believed family wasn't about keeping score. Everything changed on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I had stopped by my parents' house to drop off groceries because Mom wasn't feeling well. She was resting upstairs, so I carried the bags into the kitchen and noticed an old wooden box sitting on the dining table. It was dusty, slightly open, and looked like it had been pulled out from years of storage. As I lifted it to place it back on the shelf, a yellow envelope slipped onto the floor. Across the front, written in faded blue ink, were 5 words that made me stop breathing. Give this to Claire alone. There was no stamp, no date, no return address, just my name. I looked toward the staircase. Mom was still upstairs. My hands trembled as I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, signed by someone I never expected. And before I could finish reading the first paragraph, I realized my family had hidden the truth from me for over a decade. The next page didn't just answer my questions. It made me question every memory I had ever trusted. For several seconds, I simply stared at the signature. It belonged to my grandmother, Evelyn Foster. She had passed away 12 years earlier, just a few weeks after my college graduation. I remembered holding her hand in the hospital and promising I'd visit again the following morning. I never got the chance. She died that night. Until now, I believed she had left this world with nothing more to say. I was wrong. The letter began with a sentence that made my heart pound. Claire, if you're reading this, it means I failed to tell you the truth while I was alive. I felt a chill run through my body. My grandmother had never been dramatic. Every word she wrote had a purpose. I took a deep breath and kept reading. She wrote about our family, but not the family I thought I knew. According to her, years before I was born, my father had made a decision that changed everything. It wasn't illegal, it wasn't violent, but it was something he had sworn never to tell his children. She explained that the secret wasn't meant to protect him. It was meant to protect me. I read that sentence 3 times, hoping I had misunderstood it. Protect me? From what? The next paragraph didn't answer the question. Instead, it ended with another message. Don't ask your mother first. Ask your father. Watch his eyes before you listen to his words. I folded the letter halfway, unable to continue for another moment. Why would Grandma write something like that unless she already knew what would happen after she was gone? Just then I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. I quickly slipped the letter back into the envelope as Mom entered the kitchen. She smiled warmly, completely unaware of what I had just discovered. You didn't have to bring all these groceries, she said softly. I forced a smile and hugged her. For the first time in my life, hugging my own mother felt different. Not because I loved her any less, but because I suddenly wondered how much she actually knew. We spent the next 20 minutes talking about ordinary things, yet my mind never left the envelope hidden inside my handbag. Every answer I gave felt automatic. Every smile felt borrowed. As I prepared to leave, Mom walked me to the front door. Your father should be home soon, she said. He'd be happy to see you. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. Grandma's words echoed inside my head. Ask your father. Watch his eyes before you listen to his words. I slowly turned back toward Mom and smiled. I think I'll wait for him. She looked surprised, but only for a second. Then she quietly nodded and invited me back inside. I had no idea that the conversation waiting for me that evening would destroy the one story my father had spent 12 years trying to protect. Dad arrived home just after 6. I heard his truck pull into the driveway while I was standing at the kitchen window pretending to scroll through my phone. Mom smiled as she walked toward the front door. "Looks like your father's finally home." A few seconds later, Dad walked inside carrying his lunch bag and greeted both of us with his usual smile. "Claire," he laughed, "this is a nice surprise." I hugged him, but instead of letting go, I looked directly into his eyes. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking at my father. I was looking for the truth. Grandma had told me to watch his eyes before listening to his words. At that moment, I finally understood why. Honest people answer questions. Guilty people study your face first. Dad did exactly that. Before either of us spoke another word, his smile faded ever so slightly, almost as though he sensed something had changed. During dinner, I barely touched my food. Mom chatted about neighbors, grocery prices, and an upcoming family barbecue. But I couldn't focus on any of it. My handbag sat beside my chair, and inside it was the letter that had already changed everything. Finally, I put my fork down and looked at Dad. "Can I ask you something?" He nodded without hesitation. "Of course." I took a slow breath. "Did Grandma ever leave me a letter?" The room instantly fell silent. Dad's hand stopped halfway to his coffee mug. His eyes widened for only a fraction of a second before he forced a small smile. "A letter?" he repeated. "No. Why would she?" There it was. The eyes first, then the words. Exactly as Grandma had written. He wasn't confused. He was afraid. I slowly reached into my handbag and placed the yellow envelope on the dining table. Nobody spoke. Dad stared at it as though he'd seen a ghost. Mom looked from the envelope to Dad, completely confused. "What is this?" she asked quietly. Dad didn't answer. Instead, he picked up the envelope with shaking hands. The color drained from his face the moment he recognized Grandma's handwriting. For nearly 30 seconds, he said absolutely nothing. Then he whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. I thought this was gone. My heart sank. Gone. Not forgotten. Not unexpected. Gone. That one word told me everything I needed to know. Dad had always known the letter existed. He simply believed nobody would ever find it. Before I could ask another question, Dad slowly stood up from the table. He looked at Mom, then back at me. His voice was calm, but I could hear the guilt behind every word. "Claire, there are things about our family you were never supposed to find out." He paused, before adding the sentence that completely changed the direction of my life. "Because the day you learn the truth, you'll also learn that the man you call Dad wasn't the only father you were ever meant to know." The words echoed through my mind long after Dad stopped speaking. The man you called Dad wasn't the only father you were ever meant to know. I stared at him, waiting for him to tell me it was some terrible misunderstanding. He didn't. Mom looked just as shocked as I was. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What are you talking about?" Dad slowly sat back down, rubbed both hands across his face, and closed his eyes for a moment. He looked like a man carrying a burden that had become too heavy to hold. "I never wanted either of you to find out like this," he said quietly. "Especially not Claire." I could barely breathe. Every answer seemed to create 10 more questions. Finally, Dad looked at me. "Before your mother and I got married, she was engaged to someone else." Mom's head immediately snapped toward him. "Don't," she said firmly. "Please don't." But Dad continued. "His name was Nathan Brooks." I had never heard that name before. Not once. Not in old photo albums. Not during family stories. Not even from Grandma. Dad explained that Nathan had disappeared only a few weeks before their wedding, after accepting a construction job overseas. Months passed without a single phone call, letter, or message. Everyone believed he had chosen to leave. Mom was heartbroken. Then she discovered she was pregnant. She spent nearly a year hoping Nathan would come back, but he never did. Eventually, Dad entered her life. He loved her, accepted the baby she was carrying, and promised to raise that child as his own. That child, Dad said softly as he looked directly into my eyes, was you. The room became painfully quiet. I felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath me. My entire life, I had believed I was Dad's biological daughter. Every birthday, every school event, every lesson he taught me. None of it had ever made me question where I came from. He had never treated me differently from Ryan. Not once. My eyes slowly turned toward Mum. Tears streamed silently down her face. "I wanted to tell you," she whispered. "So many times." I shook my head. "Then why didn't you?" She looked away. "Because 6 months after you were born, we received official confirmation that Nathan had died in an accident overseas." She swallowed hard before continuing. "We believed there was nothing left for you to know." Dad quietly reached into the kitchen drawer and removed a faded photograph. He placed it in front of me. A young man stood beside Mom, smiling at the camera with one arm around her shoulders. He looked familiar. Painfully familiar. I wasn't looking at a stranger. I was looking at a man with my own eyes, my own smile, and the same small scar above his left eyebrow that I'd had since birth. Then I turned the photograph over. Written across the back, in Grandma's handwriting, were 7 words that made my heart stop. He never knew she was born alive. At that moment, I realized the biggest lie wasn't that my real father had died. It was that someone had made sure he never found us. I couldn't take my eyes off the photograph. Every feature on Nathan's face felt strangely familiar, as though I'd been looking at him in the mirror my entire life without ever realizing it. My hands trembled as I carefully placed the picture back on the table. "If he never knew I was alive," I whispered, "then who told him I wasn't?" Neither of my parents answered immediately. Dad lowered his head while Mum quietly wiped away her tears. That silence frightened me more than any answer could have. Finally, Mum spoke. "We didn't tell him." I looked at her, completely confused. "Then who did?" She closed her eyes before saying 2 words that I had never expected to hear. "My father." The room fell silent again. Grandpa Henry had passed away nearly 8 years earlier. To me, he had always been the quiet man who built birdhouses in his garage and slipped $20 bills into my birthday cards. I had never imagined he could be connected to something like this. Mum took a shaky breath before continuing. "When Nathan disappeared, my father never trusted him. He believed Nathan had abandoned me on purpose." She paused. "Then, a few months after you were born, someone finally located Nathan through the company he worked for overseas." My heart began racing. "He was alive?" Mum nodded slowly. "Yes." My mind went completely blank. "Then why didn't he come back?" Dad answered this time. "Because he never received your mother's letters." I stared at him in disbelief. Dad slowly stood up and walked toward the living room cabinet. After searching through one of the drawers, he returned carrying an old bundle tied together with faded blue ribbon. He gently placed it in front of me. "Your grandmother gave me these before she died," he said quietly. I untied the ribbon with shaking hands. Inside were nearly 20 unopened letters. Every envelope had Nathan's name written across the front in Mum's handwriting. None of them had ever been mailed. Not one. The postage stamps were still untouched. I looked toward Mum. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "I wrote to him every week for almost a year." My voice barely worked. "Then why are they still here?" Mum covered her mouth before answering. "Because my father told me he had mailed every single one." She broke down crying. He lied. I felt my entire world collapsing. Nathan hadn't disappeared from our lives. Someone had erased him before he ever had the chance to come home. As I stared at the unopened letters, one small envelope slipped from the bottom of the bundle and landed on the floor. Unlike the others, it wasn't addressed to Nathan. It was addressed to my grandfather. Across the back was a foreign postal stamp, and the envelope had already been opened years ago. I slowly unfolded the letter inside. The first sentence made my heart stop. "I have been trying to find my daughter for 11 years. Please tell Claire. I never stopped looking for her." In that moment, I realized my real father hadn't abandoned me. Someone had spent years making sure we never found each other. I read the letter 3 times before I could fully understand what it was saying. Every sentence shattered another piece of the life I thought I knew. Nathan hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't started a new family. He hadn't walked away. For 11 years, he had been searching for a daughter he believed was alive somewhere in America. My grandfather had received his letters and hidden every single one of them. I looked at Mum through blurred eyes. "Did you ever know he wrote back?" She slowly shook her head. "Never." Her voice was barely audible. "Dad always told me there was no reply." Dad leaned against the kitchen counter, unable to look at either of us. "Your grandmother found those letters only a few months before she died," he admitted. She wanted to tell you everything herself, but she became too sick. I carefully unfolded the final page of Nathan's letter. The handwriting became shakier near the bottom, as though he had been fighting to finish it. If Claire ever reads this, tell her I never chose another family over her. Every birthday, I imagined what she looked like. Every Christmas, I wondered if she still remembered my name, even though I knew she had probably never heard it. I couldn't stop the tears anymore. How do you grieve someone who never actually left? How do you forgive the years that were stolen before you even knew they existed? For 12 years, I had believed my father was gone. Now I was mourning something completely different. The life we could have had. That evening, I drove home with the letters beside me on the passenger seat. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't answer my phone. Every traffic light gave me another chance to think about one impossible question. If Nathan had been searching for me 11 years ago, what happened after that? Did he eventually give up? Did he pass away believing I wanted nothing to do with him? Or was he still alive? The thought refused to leave my mind. As soon as I reached my apartment, I spread every letter across the dining table in the order they had been written. Most ended the same way. Please tell Claire I love her. But the final envelope was different. Tucked inside was a business card with a handwritten address on the back. It wasn't an address overseas. It was in Seattle, Washington. My heart started racing. Nathan had returned to the United States. Before I could process what that meant, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Ryan's name. My brother rarely called late at night. The moment I answered, I knew something was wrong. Claire! His voice was shaking. I think someone broke into Mom and Dad's house. I stood up so quickly my chair crashed onto the floor. Then Ryan whispered the sentence that sent a chill through my entire body. And the only thing they took was Grandma's old wooden box. I reached my parents' house less than 20 minutes later. Police cars were parked outside, their flashing lights turning the quiet street into a sea of red and blue. Mom was sitting on the front porch wrapped in a blanket, while Dad spoke to one of the officers. Ryan walked toward me the moment I stepped out of my car. They're inside, he said quietly. It wasn't random. I looked at him in confusion. What do you mean? He lowered his voice. Nothing expensive is missing. I froze. Not the TV, not Mom's jewelry, not Dad's safe. He swallowed hard. Just Grandma's wooden box, and every letter that was inside it. I pushed past the officers and walked into the house. Every drawer in the living room had been pulled open. Family photographs were scattered across the floor. The cabinet where Grandma's box had been stored stood wide open. Whoever had broken in hadn't wasted time searching the entire house. They had walked straight to the one place that mattered. One officer approached me with a notebook in his hand. Ma'am, he asked politely, did that box contain anything valuable? I looked at him for a moment before answering. Not money, he nodded. Jewelry? I slowly shook my head. The truth. He looked confused, wrote something in his notebook, and thanked me before walking away. Dad finally came inside after speaking with the police. He looked exhausted. There's something I didn't tell you yesterday, he admitted quietly. I stared at him. What now? He hesitated before speaking. After your grandmother died, someone asked me if I'd found her letters. My heart skipped a beat. Who? Dad looked directly into my eyes. A man I had never met before. He walked to the kitchen drawer, removed an old business card, and handed it to me. Across the front was a name I had never heard. Elias Mercer, private investigator. On the back, Dad had written a date from nearly 11 years earlier. He said he was working for someone named Nathan Brooks, Dad whispered. He believed your father was still searching for you. My hands began shaking. Nathan hadn't stopped looking. He had hired someone to find me. Before I could ask another question, Ryan suddenly spoke from the doorway. Dad, his face had turned pale. You need to see this. We followed him into the backyard. Near the back fence, hidden beneath the porch light, lay a single white envelope. It hadn't been there when the police arrived. Someone had placed it there while the house was full of officers. There was no stamp, no address, just one sentence written across the front in black ink. Stop looking for Nathan, unless you're ready to bury the last secret with him. The break-in wasn't about hiding the past anymore. It was a warning that someone was willing to do anything to keep the truth buried. The envelope felt cold in my hands. I looked around the backyard, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever had left it behind, but the street was empty. The police searched the neighborhood for over an hour, yet no security camera captured anyone approaching the house. It was as if the person had appeared for a few seconds, delivered the warning, and vanished. One officer asked if I had any enemies. I almost laughed. 24 hours earlier, I would have said no without hesitation. Now I wasn't sure I knew my own family's history well enough to answer. That night I stayed at my parents' house. None of us wanted Mom to be alone after the break-in. Around midnight, while everyone else had finally fallen asleep, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the anonymous note. The words kept repeating in my mind. Stop looking for Nathan. Whoever wrote it wasn't trying to scare me away from the past. They were trying to keep me away from one specific person. That could only mean one thing. Nathan wasn't just part of history. He was still connected to whatever was happening now. I pulled out my laptop and typed the Seattle address from the business card into an online search. It led to a small marine engineering company near the waterfront. The company was still operating. My heart began racing. If Nathan had worked there, someone inside might still remember him. Early the next morning, I called the company's front desk. A friendly receptionist answered. I asked as calmly as I could. I'm trying to locate someone who worked there years ago. His name is Nathan Brooks. There was a brief pause while she searched the records. Then she replied, Yes, Mr. Brooks worked with us for several years. My pulse quickened. Do you know where I can contact him? Another pause. I'm sorry, she said. I can't share personal information. I thanked her and was about to hang up when she unexpectedly added, But if you're family, you should probably know he still visits the office once every month. Everything around me went silent. He still visits? Yes. He retired a few years ago, but he comes in to have coffee with the staff. I could barely speak. So, he's alive? Yes, ma'am. I ended the call and simply stared at my phone. For 12 years, I had mourned a man I believed was dead. For 11 years, that same man had been searching for me, and now I knew he was alive. Just as I was about to tell Mom and Dad the news, my phone buzzed with a new email from an unknown sender. There was no message, only one attachment. It was an old photograph. Nathan was standing outside the Seattle office. The timestamp showed it had been taken. Yesterday morning? At the bottom of the email were 7 chilling words. You're already too late. He's being watched too. I couldn't stop staring at the photograph. It had been taken less than 24 hours earlier. Nathan looked older than the man in the faded picture from Mom's photo album, but there was no doubt it was him. The same eyes, the same smile, the same scar above his left eyebrow. My hands began shaking as I zoomed in on the image. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Nathan wasn't alone. Standing across the street, partially hidden behind a parked SUV, was another man. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking directly at Nathan. The email contained no sender name, no explanation, and no demand. Just the photograph and one warning. You're already too late. He's being watched too. I immediately called the Seattle office again, but this time nobody answered. I tried a second time, then a third. Straight to voicemail every time. My heart was racing. Whoever had sent that email clearly knew where Nathan was. More importantly, they knew I was searching for him. That meant someone had been watching me as closely as they had been watching him. By lunchtime, I had booked the first available flight to Seattle. Mom insisted on coming with me, but I gently refused. If this turns out to be dangerous, I told her, one of us needs to stay here with Dad. She hugged me tightly before slipping something into my hand. It was Grandma's silver locket. I remembered seeing her wear it almost every day when I was a child. She always said this belonged to you one day, Mom whispered. I think she'd want you to have it now. I smiled through my tears and placed it around my neck without opening it. At that moment, it simply felt like a piece of Grandma I wanted close to me. A few hours later, I was sitting by the window on my flight, watching the clouds pass beneath the plane. My mind replayed every moment of the past week. The hidden letter, the unopened envelopes, the break-in, the anonymous warnings. None of it felt real anymore. I reached up and gently touched Grandma's locket, hoping it would somehow calm my thoughts. As my fingers pressed against the tiny clasp, it suddenly clicked open by itself. Inside wasn't a photograph. It was a folded piece of paper. I carefully unfolded it. Written in Grandma's unmistakable handwriting were just 2 lines. If you ever find Nathan, never trust the first person who says they know him. My stomach tightened. Before I could think about what the message meant, the plane landed in Seattle. As passengers began leaving their seats, my phone vibrated. It was another email from the same anonymous sender. This one contained only 1 sentence. Don't go to the office. They're expecting you there. Rehook. At that moment, I realized I wasn't walking into a reunion with my father. I was walking into a trap someone had prepared long before my plane ever landed. I remained seated until nearly every passenger had left the plane. The anonymous email echoed through my mind. Don't go to the office. They're expecting you there. It wasn't a guess. Whoever sent it knew exactly where I planned to go. That meant one of 2 things. Either they were trying to protect me, or they were manipulating me just like everyone else had. As I stepped into the terminal, I ignored the signs for taxis and walked toward a quiet corner instead. If someone was watching the airport, I wasn't going to make their job easy. I opened the business card again and searched for Elias Mercer, the private investigator Dad had mentioned. Unlike 12 years ago, his agency was still operating. There was an office less than 20 minutes from the airport. I called immediately. Mercer Investigations. The calm voice on the other end answered. My name is Claire Foster, I said carefully. There was complete silence. Then the man quietly replied, I've been wondering how long it would take before you called. My heart nearly stopped. You know who I am? I've known who you are for 11 years. I booked a ride to his office instead of Nathan's workplace. When I arrived, Elias Mercer was already waiting outside. He looked to be in his early 60s with silver hair and tired eyes. The moment he saw me, he smiled sadly. You look exactly like your father. Those words hit harder than I expected. He invited me inside without asking another question. His office walls were covered with filing cabinets, maps, and old investigation boards. He walked to one cabinet, unlocked it, and pulled out a thick file. Across the front were 3 words. Claire Foster Case. He placed it gently on the desk. I started looking for you when you were 7. I stared at him in disbelief. Nathan hired you? He nodded. He never stopped searching. Elias slowly opened the file. Inside were school photographs, copies of newspaper articles, old addresses, even pictures of my college. Graduation. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Nathan had missed every important moment of my life, yet somehow he had still watched me grow up from a distance. He found me, I whispered. Elias nodded again. More than once. I looked at him in complete confusion. Then why didn't he come to me? The investigator slowly removed one final document from the bottom of the file. It was a court order. Across the top, in bold letters, were the words, No contact request. My hands began shaking. At the bottom, someone had signed my mother's name. I don't understand, I whispered. Elias looked at me with genuine sympathy. Neither did Nathan. He believed your mother never wanted him anywhere near you. I felt the room spinning around me, because if that signature was real, everything Mom had told me was another lie. But the biggest shock wasn't the signature itself. It was what the forensic report attached to it revealed. Part 11. Picked up the forensic report with trembling hands. My eyes immediately searched for the conclusion at the bottom of the page. I stopped breathing the moment I found it. The signature attributed to Melissa Foster is inconsistent with verified handwriting samples and is highly likely to be forged. I looked at Elias. What does this mean? He slowly folded his hands together. It means your mother never signed that document. My mind went completely blank. If she didn't sign it, who did? Elias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened another folder from inside the case file. I've waited 11 years for someone to ask me that question. Inside were copies of bank records, legal correspondence, and several emails exchanged between Nathan and his attorney. One email caught my attention. Nathan had written, Melissa would never keep Claire away from me. Someone is pretending to speak for her. I felt tears filling my eyes. He had trusted Mom even. After all those years, he had never believed she would willingly separate a father from his daughter. So what happened? I whispered. Elias leaned back in his chair. Every time Nathan located your address, someone changed it. Every time he tried to contact your family, someone intercepted the letters. Every time he came close, someone moved you further away. I couldn't understand it. Who would do something like that? Elias slowly slid one final document across the desk. It wasn't a police report. It wasn't a legal record. It was an investigation timeline. One name appeared beside nearly every major event. The forged signature, the intercepted letters, the missing wooden box, the anonymous property records, the break-in. Every line pointed toward the same person. My grandfather, Henry Lawson. My hands began shaking. Uncontrollably. No, whispered. He's been gone for years. Elias nodded. Slowly. Yes. But the person helping him isn't. The office suddenly felt silent. There was someone else? Elias nodded. He never acted alone. Before I could ask another question, his office phone rang. He answered immediately. Within seconds, every trace of color disappeared from his face. What? He stood up so quickly his chair fell backward. When? He ended the call and looked directly at me. Claire, Nathan never arrived home last night. My heart stopped. What do you mean? The police found his truck abandoned, near the Seattle Marina. I couldn't move. They believe... He struggled to finish the sentence. Someone took him. Before either of us could speak again, my own phone buzzed. Another anonymous message. Only 6 words. You're finally asking the right questions. Beneath the message was a live location pin, and the location wasn't somewhere in Seattle. It was pointing directly to my parents' house. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I checked the location again, hoping I had read it wrong. I hadn't. The blinking red pin sat directly over my parents' home. More than 2,000 miles away. I looked at Elias. This has to be fake. He stepped closer, studied my phone for a few seconds, then quietly shook his head. No, his expression grew serious. That location is being shared live. My heart started pounding. If Nathan had disappeared in Seattle, why would someone send me a live location from my parents' house? Before I could think any further, I called Mom, straight to voicemail. I called Dad. No answer. Ryan. Nothing. Every call ended the same way. Complete silence. Elias immediately picked up his car keys. We're going to the marina first, he said. If Nathan was taken, there might still be evidence. 20 minutes later, we arrived at the waterfront. Yellow police tape surrounded an empty parking space where Nathan's truck had been found. Detectives were photographing tire marks while divers searched the water nearby. One officer recognized Elias immediately. You're too late, he said quietly. Whoever was here knew exactly what they were doing. I stood beside Nathan's abandoned truck, trying to imagine what had happened the night before. Then something caught my eye. Tucked beneath the driver's side windshield wiper was a tiny folded piece of paper the police had somehow missed. I carefully unfolded it. Inside were just 4 words. She knows everything now. The handwriting wasn't Nathan's. It wasn't my grandfather's either. Elias stared at the note before whispering, "This wasn't left for the police. It was left for you." A detective walked over before we could say another word. Are you Claire Foster? I nodded. He reached into his jacket and handed me a sealed evidence bag. We found this inside Mr. Brooks' truck. Inside the bag was Grandma Evelyn's silver bracelet, the one she had been buried without. My hands began shaking. How is this possible? Nobody answered, because none of us understood how something buried 12 years ago had suddenly appeared inside Nathan's truck. Before I could process it, my phone rang. This time it wasn't an anonymous number. It was Dad. I answered immediately. Dad, where are you? His breathing was heavy. Claire, we're all right. But someone broke into the house again. I closed my eyes. What did they take this time? There was a long silence. Then Dad whispered something that made my blood run cold. They didn't take anything. They left something. What? Dad's voice cracked. A photograph. I swallowed hard. Of who? Another silence. Then he answered, "Of you, standing outside this house 30 minutes ago." My entire body froze, because at that exact moment, I was standing nearly 2,000 miles away in Seattle. Whoever was behind this wasn't just hiding the past anymore. They wanted my family to believe I was part of it. For the next few seconds, I couldn't speak. Dad's words echoed inside my head. They left a photograph of you standing outside this house 30 minutes ago. It was impossible. I was in Seattle. Hundreds of people had seen me at the airport. The airline had my boarding records. The police had just spoken to me at the marina. Yet somehow, someone wanted my family to believe I had secretly returned home. "Dad," I said firmly, "don't let anyone touch that photograph. I'm getting on the first flight back." He quietly agreed before hanging up. I turned toward Elias. "They're framing me." He nodded. "No. They're distracting you." "What do you mean?" He looked toward the abandoned truck. "Whoever is doing this doesn't want you asking where Nathan is. They want you defending yourself instead." The realization hit me instantly. Every anonymous message, every warning, every break-in, every fake clue had one purpose: to keep me moving in the wrong direction. Elias suddenly froze. His eyes remained fixed on Nathan's truck. "Claire, come here." He pointed, beneath the driver's seat. Police officers had already searched the vehicle, but one loose section of carpet had been missed. He carefully lifted it. Hidden underneath was a small GPS tracker. It wasn't attached to the truck. It had been hidden inside. A detective immediately rushed over. "We never found that." Elias looked at him. "Because you weren't looking for someone tracking Nathan. You were looking for someone kidnapping him." The detective carefully removed the tracker. "It's still active." He connected it to a laptop. Within seconds, a blinking map appeared. Everyone leaned closer. The signal wasn't coming from Seattle anymore. It was moving, heading east fast. Someone had taken the tracker with them. The detective zoomed in. The destination wasn't random. It was headed toward Denver, Colorado. Elias looked at me. "If Nathan is with that tracker, he's still alive." Hope flooded through me for the first time in days. Just then, my phone vibrated. Again. Another anonymous message. "You're finally close." Attached was a short video. I pressed play. The recording lasted only 8 seconds. Nathan was sitting in a dimly lit room. His hands weren't tied. He wasn't injured. He simply looked directly into the camera. Then he slowly said, "Claire, if you're watching this, don't trust the investigator." The screen went black. I felt my entire body go cold. I slowly turned toward Elias. He was staring at my phone. Face had gone completely pale. He didn't deny it. He didn't explain it. Instead, he quietly whispered one sentence. "That video wasn't recorded for you. It was recorded for the person who stole it from me." I couldn't take my eyes off Elias. Nathan's warning echoed inside my head. Don't trust the investigator. Every instinct told me to step away from him, but another part of me remembered everything he had done since I arrived in Seattle. He had shown me the case file. He had introduced me to the detectives. He had never asked me for money or tried to stop me from finding Nathan. None of it made sense. I slowly lowered my phone. "Tell me the truth," I said quietly. "Right now." Elias didn't argue. He simply sat down, removed his glasses, and let out a long breath. "Nathan asked me to disappear 6 years ago." I frowned. "Why?" He looked directly into my eyes. "Because every time I found a lead, someone else found him first." The detective standing beside us folded his arms. "Who?" Elias slowly shook his head. "I never knew their name." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thin black notebook. But I knew they had access to police reports, legal records, and private investigators. He opened the notebook to the final page. Across the top was a title written in capital letters, Project Harbor. "What is that?" I asked. "It's the name Nathan gave to the person following him." He explained that during the last 5 years, Nathan had moved 4 different times. Each time, someone located him within weeks. Every phone number he changed, every apartment he rented, every new job he accepted. Someone always knew. Nathan became convinced he wasn't being followed by one person. He believed he was being watched by an entire network. The detective carefully looked through the notebook. Every page contained dates, license plate numbers, addresses, photographs. Nathan had documented everything. Then one page stopped me cold. At the bottom was today's date. Next to it, Nathan had written only one sentence. If anything happens to me, the answer isn't in Seattle. I looked up. Then where is it? Elias quietly turned to the very last page. There was a map. Not of Seattle, not of Denver. It was my hometown, right where my parents still lived. One location had been circled in red, the old abandoned train station on the edge of town. I immediately recognized it. It had been closed for nearly 20 years. No one went there anymore. Before anyone could say another word, the detective's radio suddenly came to life. We found him. Everyone froze. The detective grabbed the radio. Repeat that, a voice answered. We located Nathan Brooks. My heart leaped. Is he okay? The reply came immediately. No, he escaped. What? He broke free before officers arrived. The room fell silent. Then the officer added one final sentence. He left a message written on the wall. The detective looked at me before quietly reading the report. Claire, don't come looking for me. Go home. The person you need to find has been living inside your family all along. The flight home felt longer than any journey I'd ever taken. Nathan's final message repeated inside my head over and over again. The person you need to find has been living inside your family all along. Every possibility terrified me. It couldn't be Mom. It couldn't be Dad. Ryan had only learned the truth a few days earlier. So who was left? By the time I reached my hometown, the sun was beginning to rise. Dad was waiting outside the airport. The moment I got into the car, neither of us spoke. He simply drove. After nearly 15 minutes, I finally broke the silence. Did you tell anyone I was coming home? Dad looked at the road. No, only your mother. I nodded. Then another thought entered my mind. What about Aunt Linda? Dad's hands tightened around the steering wheel. I didn't tell her. Something about his expression changed. He slowly pulled the car onto the side of the road. There was something Nathan once asked me. I looked at him. He asked if your Aunt Linda had ever visited your grandfather before the letters disappeared. I frowned. She practically lived there. Dad slowly nodded. I know. Suddenly everything connected. Grandpa had been elderly. Someone had to help him. Someone had access to the house. Someone could have intercepted the letters. Someone could have mailed fake documents. Someone could have removed evidence after Grandpa died. My heart began racing. Aunt Linda. Dad quietly whispered. I never wanted to believe it. We drove directly to the old train station marked on Nathan's map. The building had been abandoned for decades. Broken windows, rusted tracks, silence. As we stepped inside, I noticed a single lantern glowing in the middle of the platform. Beside it stood Nathan. Alive. For a second, neither of us moved. Then I ran. He opened his arms before I even reached him. The hug lasted only a few seconds, yet somehow it healed 12 years of unanswered questions. When we finally stepped apart, tears filled both our eyes. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I never stopped looking. I know. Those 2 words were all he needed to hear. Then another voice echoed through the station. So, you finally found each other. We turned around. Standing near the entrance was Aunt Linda. She wasn't crying. She wasn't frightened. She was smiling. I suppose it was only a matter of time. Dad stared at his sister in disbelief. Why? She laughed softly. Because your father promised me everything. What? He said if Nathan disappeared, this family would stay exactly the way he wanted. She admitted everything. She had hidden Mom's letters. She had mailed forged documents. She had delivered fake legal papers. After Grandpa died, she continued protecting the lie because she believed the truth would destroy the family forever. But it wasn't just about the family, Nathan said quietly. It was about the inheritance Grandpa promised you. Linda lowered her eyes. She didn't deny it. Police officers quietly entered the station behind her. Elias Mercer had called them before I landed. Without resistance, Linda surrendered. As officers led her away, she looked back at me one final time. I thought I was protecting everyone. I shook my head. No. You were protecting a lie. 6 months later, our family gathered for the first time without secrets. Nathan never tried to replace the father who had raised me. He thanked Dad instead. You gave her the life I couldn't. Dad smiled. And now she finally has both of us. That afternoon, Grandma Evelyn's old letter was framed and placed above the fireplace. Not as a reminder of betrayal, but as proof that the truth can survive even the longest silence. I looked around the room. Mom, Dad, Ryan, Nathan. For the first time in my life, my family wasn't perfect. It was honest, and I finally understood something Grandma had known all along. The strongest families aren't the ones without secrets. They're the ones brave enough to face the truth before it's too late. Sometimes the greatest truth isn't found in the past. It's found in the courage to face it. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more original emotional family stories every week. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were Claire? Thanks for watching, and remember, the truth always finds its way home.